We get it. We've heard the complaints. I've seen the comments. We're losing you. Red Bull's winning all the time. Max is winning all the time. But stay with us. I'm going to try and reel you back in.
Before we get into this episode, check out the Turn 1 merch store. I'll link it down in the description below. We have a ton of F1 related merchandise at way discounted prices compared to what you'll see at races or online or on Amazon. So check it out and let us know in the comments if there's something specific you want to see.
Yeah, that way you can support your Blue Energy Drink racing team.
All right, let's get into it.
Now entering the grid. Here are your hosts, Thomas and Jeremiah.
Welcome back to another episode of Turn 1 Podcast. We're your hosts, Jeremiah
and Thomas.
We understand F1 has been losing a little bit of popularity. I don't like this. I'm not going to stand for this, and I'm going to try and pull you back in. But to play devil's advocate, we're going to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I brought up a couple of stats, and we might look at those as we go through this, but this is more just a conversation about where the state of F1 is, and we want your feedback too. Let us know in the comments what you're hearing from your fan groups or your family or your friends or anybody that you engage in the sport of F1 with. We recently started going more to the DFW F1 club meetings and getting ingrained in that group. But as a whole, the reason I thought of this topic for this episode, Drive to Survive brought in this crazy influx of Formula One fans. You look pre-Drive to Survive, the attendance numbers in person were averaging 160 to 200,000 over a weekend. Post Drive to Survive coming out, the average is over 300,000 for races. That's across all races of the year, which most of them don't even hold that many people. So your really big races like Great Britain and Austin, COTA, Miami, they're all bringing in a ton of people. Again, the reason that I bring this up though is that Drive to Survive is pretty niche. It brought in a lot of fans for the storylines and the dramatics, but are they actually caring about the races? Are they going season to season watching all the races and the qualifying and the practices? Are they getting tired of Max winning all the time? Because remember, Drive to Survive started right at the tail end of Lewis's dominant run.
Right.
So you saw this turmoil and change from the Lewis Hamilton era to the Max Verstappen era. Now we're just in the Max Verstappen era.
Right. And it was cool because, like you were talking about, we had this kind of story unfolding where we had Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen, and we had this up-and-coming Red Bull team as they try to recover from winning all those championships with Sebastian Vettel, and then it shifted to Mercedes for the next 6 years.
Right.
And so Daniel Ricciardo and Max Verstappen are going back and forth, and then Danny's like, I'm out of here. He goes, and you follow that storyline, and then it's the rise of Max, right? As he gets older, more experienced, the car becomes better, the engineering becomes better, the team gets faster and faster until now you have a Drive to Survive season where it's talking about the back markers and it's Max Verstappen wins again in the background, and that's fine and dandy. But the thing is when you're watching Drive to Survive, you're getting the storylines, you're getting the stuff that you don't see, and when you're watching the actual season, all you really do see is Max Verstappen winning.
Yep.
But it depends on what you're looking at, right? If you're paying attention to the forums, if you're paying attention to the Instagram posts, the TikToks, the breaking news and all this, you will see nuances out there, different things that is that drama that will be told when you're watching the Drive to Survive season when it comes out. But you get to see kind of the early side of it, and you don't get the full story, obviously, of all the different commentary from all the drivers and everybody until that new season of Drive to Survive comes out. But you get to see what's happening, and you get involved. I personally like that. I like to see, like Lewis Hamilton joins Ferrari. Like well, it's already out there in Drive to Survive, but I haven't gotten that far yet. That's on me. But so we'll get to see this whole debacle with Christian Horner and Red Bull we talked about in the next season. That's all stuff that's to be determined, but you're getting to see it unfold right now. And if you're paying attention, if you're looking at the articles, if you're reading along, you are up to date on that information.
That's a really good point too, where what were you saying the other day? You were watching Drive to Survive and it brought up Lewis's contract situation, and you, in your head, just because you're up to date on F1, you're like, this is the move to Ferrari.
Right.
But it wasn't, because it's a year behind.
Right.
So if you're a casual F1 fan that's only in it watching Drive to Survive, you're like, is he going to sign with Mercedes? Like, is he still going to be? But if you're up to date and you're just constantly following the action, you know that he did re-sign with Mercedes, and the newest news is that he is not signed with Mercedes for 2025. So it's a whole news cycle removed, or multiple news cycles removed from reality. And here's where the issue comes in. The people that aren't, if you just came into Formula One and you're there to watch the winners, like in American sports, it's all about winning, right? That's We care about the Super Bowl champion, the national championship, all of that stuff. That's what the World Series. Formula One is different, and this is very hard, I think, to explain to the American market. It took me quite a bit of time to come around to it as well. When I started watching Drive to Survive, I thought they did a genius job of starting with kind of the Haas-Williams story.
You had to. Lewis was winning.
But also I think that was a great way to try to show American fans how F1 is different than sports we're used to. The difference being the action isn't always who's winning. You could cheer for that person. You can, like, Max has a giant fan base, of course, all that. I think everyone knows on here I tend to like Max and Red Bull. But that's not where you should be watching if you're just a casual fan. The action is in the midfield. The action is in the lower tiers of F1 where teams are fighting to stay alive, where teams are fighting to get drivers, they're fighting to get money. They're not fighting for 26 points a race. They're fighting for 2 points a race.
Or one, honestly.
And after watching Drive to Survive for a little bit, I think you and I both came around on that idea of, okay, we're watching the Haas, the Williams, the Alpine win. Lewis or Max is running away with it. We're watching Aston Martin rise from being the 8th team to the 4th team.
We're watching Alpine fall from grace.
Seriously, that's where the storyline is. And my only concern, and the reason why we think F1 might be done. Now, F1's not going away. Don't get me wrong. F1 is...
No, the loyal fans are going to stay the loyal fans. They had a fan base before Drive to Survive. They'll have a fan base after Drive to Survive.
Yeah, it's just to what level. And there was an article that I found, I think from Black Book Motorsports, that predicted that by 2025, over 50% of the new fans that came in during the Drive to Survive era will have exited as fans of the sport, which I can 100% see.
Yeah.
Now, the difference is, where are you going to see that? So I was trying to pull TV viewership numbers, but it's very difficult to get TV viewership numbers because it's split between so many places. You have the European market on like Sky Sports and all that.
Yep.
Then you have the American market on ESPN, and then you just have F1 TV, and it was very hard for me to aggregate all those numbers. But the in-race, in-person attendance, I don't really know if that's going to dip off because the fans that came in with Drive to Survive and were hardcore and started going to the races are still going to be there.
Oh, sure.
They're not the people going to the races aren't the ones that are going to fall off.
Right.
And so you're still going to see Coda have 400,000 and Great Britain have 480,000, some ridiculous number. It's just a matter of when you're watching the sport, who's still going to be watching. The other side of this is sponsorships. We've seen a lot of companies. Yeah, go ahead.
Before you get into sponsorships, I want to touch on this because we're moving away from it.
Okay.
You made a good point earlier. You said the focus isn't on the World Championship per se. It's on the back markers. I wanted to add to that before we moved on. Sure. The focus is on the World Championships, but not to the degree that you think. It's not during Max's second championship. Oh, Max's third championship. Oh, Lewis's third, fourth, fifth, sixth championship. The focus is in the 2010 season when there was a 5-way race for the championship between Fernando Alonso, Jenson Button, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton. And then the 2021 race between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. That's when the championship becomes critical. Or heck, even 2022 when it was Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen and you didn't know what was going to happen.
For at least the first half of the year, that was the storyline.
If there is a battle for the championship, all focus is on the championship. Right. All of it. But if one guy's running away with the season, you have to find interest elsewhere, and that's what we were getting to. All right, back to sponsorship.
No, sorry, that's a really good point. I should have made that point back when I was talking about it. But 100%, when in 2021, even looking at that season of Drive to Survive, it was like 80% about Max and Lewis. Because remember, Max and Lewis were like crashing every other race into each other.
Yeah, and their point totals were neck and neck, down to the 0.5 points, half a point.
But this season, we're 2 races in, about to be 3 races in. And I'm 100% sure Max Verstappen is going to win the championship. And that's cool. Like, I know that. So now I know he's going to win 99% of the races. I'm going to watch where the battles are elsewhere. I'm going to watch for Alex Albon to way outpace the Williams. I'm going to watch for, is Zhou Guanyu going to take a step up?
Is Alpine going to recover?
Is Alpine going to finish last in the Constructors' Championship? Like, that is a very real possibility right now.
Yeah.
Unless they come out with a major upgrade package, that is very real. And so if you've been watching Drive to Survive and you're a casual fan, start trying to look at these storylines. Where again, if you just started Drive to Survive 2 back in like the 2018 season or whatever, Alpine was fighting to be a top 3 team. They were just on the precipice of joining the top 3.
Renault.
Fighting with McLaren, fighting with Ferrari and Red Bull and all that. Picture that, but now we're their 10th.
That's ridiculous.
Okay, so sponsorships, and then I want to look at maybe how F1 can curb this decline. We've seen a lot of teams. I don't know exactly when the timeline of these sponsorships were, but there's a lot of American teams now sponsoring Formula One, which I don't think was necessarily the case before because the American viewership was just not there.
Right.
Like COTA was a big deal because it was the American race.
Right.
But now F1 in the States is huge. So you have companies like Google Chrome with their giant McLaren ads. You have Oracle literally being the name of Red Bull Racing is Oracle, which is an American brand. Like a lot of the companies are American based. If that American market, which again is a majority of the Drive to Survive market, starts to go away, do companies start to see that hit the financials a little bit?
That's possible. I didn't even actually think about that because then you got to go and look for more sponsorships, which that's not going to hinder teams like McLaren.
No.
But when you're a Haas team that's fighting for your MoneyGram sponsor, or you're, I'm trying to think of another one that's on a lower team, or heck, Alpine has had massive investments across the board from American fan base. Ryan Reynolds, Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, they're all invested in Alpine. Does that go away?
Does a company like Duracell say, hey,
Duracell,
Williams, you're not cutting it. F1 has lost 50% of its viewerships. We're going to move our sponsorship to Red Bull.
Yeah.
Seriously, for the same price as paying you. That's something very real that could happen. The cost cap could offset some of those losses a little bit where you have a more level playing field for the teams. But I just thought that was an interesting point where it happens in every sport. In the NFL, if viewership goes down, advertising goes down.
Right.
The financials behind it. You might still have the same number of advertisers, but the value of that is decreased because it's based on viewership. Looking ahead, though, if F1's looking at this as a problem, which they probably are looking at it as a problem, even though they're still doing way better now than they were pre-Drive to Survive, 1,000% better. We've mentioned this several times throughout the history of our podcast, which is something NASCAR tried to do to increase viewership was to trick up races. They added stage racing. They added the playoffs. They added more street circuits. They're running 3 or 4 street circuits in NASCAR now.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet.
They did a dirt race at Bristol. They did a race in the USC Memorial Coliseum in LA. They're doing so many special events as part of the regular season to get more viewership. I think the only real time we've seen that from F1 has been the introduction of sprint races about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Which we're not fans of, but maybe they looked at this and saw our Drive to Survive audience is leaving. We need to give them something to
So you
watch
think that
on
was
race
the
day.
early push?
It could have, because I don't see any other reason to justify the sprints. And I know we talked a lot about sprints, so I don't want to get too far into that, but I don't see any other reason to justify sprints other than we need to give these people something else.
Okay, so what ideas do you have as possible revamps of the fame?
I think the two biggest easy ones are, one of them is already coming up, which is Audi joining the grid in 26.
Okay.
That is going to bring buzz and popularity. You're going to have some Audi clubs and fan bases come into it. They're going to bring in some level of sponsorship that generates buzz. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows, when they sign drivers, what that's going to be like, because they're probably not going to keep Bottas and Zhou, or maybe they will. I don't know. So you're going to have that. The other big one is one we've referenced before as well, which is, how do you keep building on the American market? You got the American market with Drive to Survive. You added Miami. You added Vegas. You have them right now. How do you not lose them? Get another true American team on the grid in Andretti. Because, sorry, but Haas is not cutting it as America's team. They don't even leverage that they're America's team.
Yeah, it's a problem. It's definitely a problem, but more realistic than the Andretti move. And the reason I say that is because the Andretti move has been halted.
Yep.
Now it's going to be revisited, but at the moment it's halted. More realistic than that is a guarantee, right? What's guaranteed? In 2026, Cadillac is going to come in as an engine manufacturer, which means you can get your engine from Mercedes, you can get your engine from Ferrari, you can get it from, I guess, Renault or Alpine, it'd be Renault, or you can get it from Cadillac. And then eventually, of course, Red Bull powertrains is going to be a thing.
And isn't Red Bull somehow partnered with Ford?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Red Bull and Ford are going to be going in cahoots, and they're coming up with Red Bull powertrains, but it's like Ford Red Bull powertrains or whatever you want to call it.
Max is just going to go out there in a GT40.
I would want to see that. Look, listen, here's how you bring it out, right? Here's how you bring it out. Get Max to race Le Mans for Red Bull driving a Ford.
In a simulator, because they're not going to actually let him do that in real life.
But that would be great marketing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Cadillac thing is locked in. The Ford thing is locked in. Andretti is still very borderline. And the reason that it's still borderline is because F1 basically said, hey, Andretti, you don't bring enough value to Formula One. Formula One brings more value to your brand. Which my argument to that is Williams, and you would counter that by saying, well, Williams is a historic constructor, but what have they done for you lately? What have they done for you the last 40 years? A bunch of nothing.
On top of that, one of F1's world champions, Mario Andretti.
Yeah.
There's a tie.
Like
there's
he's
a
your
link
guy.
there. On top of that, Mario Andretti went and won at races across the world, like not just like in one motorsport, but different motorsports. I mean, he won in IndyCar. He won in what is it? Midget racing.
Yeah.
The midget cars. Yeah, he's a champion across multiple different
Like
fields of
4 or 5
motorsport.
different motorsports.
How does that not bring value to your sport?
It brings credibility as an owner because your owner isn't a financial mogul. It's a dude that did this thing.
It's literally a racer.
The other thing that I think could bring fans in, and it's what we started this conversation with, which is why are fans leaving? The casual fans are leaving because you have one guy winning everything, which if you're a diehard fan, again, to look at the midfield, to root for Lewis or Fernando or Lando or somebody else to topple Max one race out of the year. Like Carlos winning last year was huge.
Oh, yeah.
Winning that one race and Max not getting it. Max has stated a time or two before that he will likely not finish his racing career in Formula One.
Right.
He will retire from Formula One and do something entirely different, whether that's another racing series, doing a simulator league that he's already started. Like, he will do something other than Formula One before he has left his prime racing career. It's just a matter of when. And if he wins 2 or 3 more championships in a row and then like 2026 hits with all the new stuff, maybe he just doesn't want to deal with that.
Well, here's another thing, too, is I'm pretty sure he came out a while back and said that he wouldn't race for another team. If his time came with Red Bull and it was up, that he would probably just leave the sport. Now, granted, there are rumors out there of a possible move to Mercedes and stuff like that because of all the scandals and everything that's come out. But let's think about what he said in the past. That's been guaranteed. That's not a rumor. And that was that he said he wouldn't go race for another team. If his contract came up with Red Bull and they didn't renew, he would just go to another motorsport. On top of that, the fact that, like you said, he's already said he's not going to finish his career in F1. And he's what, 26 now? 20?
Yeah.
Somewhere mid-20s. Mid-20s. So if you think about how long a driver's career is, maybe he finishes his 20s in F1 and then in his 30s he goes off into the distance.
Again, so 2026 is the next major regulation change. If Red Bull doesn't crack the code with that car, and you have maybe Lewis is still around, but you have Lando, Oscar,
Russell,
like you have these next gen drivers that are still going to be around, and like F1 is their thing. They don't have a Max out because they haven't been 6-time champion at that point. Like if McLaren figures it out or Mercedes figures it out, like if Carlos goes to Mercedes, like, what's the point in sticking around and fighting for that if you honestly want to move to something else? And the whole reason for bringing up the Max discussion is you're now going to have a fight for first again.
Oh, yeah.
Even if that's just 1 year where, let's say, Lando's the new top dog in F1 when Max leaves. Okay, well, year 2, you're not going to know that he's the reigning top dog, so it's going to be a battle again.
And we're not even talking about, yes, the fight. We're going to have a fight for first in terms of the drivers. But it's more than that. We're going to have a fight for first in terms of the constructors.
All of it.
Who will be the new dominant constructor? Because when the turbo hybrid era first started, Mercedes was dominant. Right before that, in the V8 era, where they had the dual diffusers, it was Red Bull. So now it goes from Mercedes back to Red Bull because they figured it out with the new car setups and then the new regulations. But the regulations are about to change in 2026. Who will have it figured out? Right. Who's going to bring the car that's the new wave that everybody copies for the next 6 years?
You have a team in Audi, which is probably already working on that now.
Yes. They're not focused on the 2024 season or the 2025 season. They've been focused for 3 years on the regulations set for the 2026 season.
Which, I'm not saying that Audi's going to be a winning team by any means, but it throws a wrench into...
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting if nothing else. So, all that to say, a battle, whether it be for the drivers, the constructors, or both, that will certainly bring some more fan excitement in, even if it's just temporary. But I don't know. I think... Oh, here's the other curveball. What if they stop making Drive to Survive?
Yeah, that's going to be a problem because we've definitely heard on news outlets like our favorite talk radio where where they've clearly stated that they watch the Drive to Survive, but they do not watch the races whatsoever.
We've heard on Dallas-based sports radio that the races are quote boring. And it goes back to what we were talking about, which is you're not watching the right places. But there are even if you are watching the midfield race, there are some races that are just boring.
I'm sorry. If you watch the 2023 Australian Grand Prix, where there was 3 red flags and only 12 people finished out of 20 cars, crashes all over the place, and then you had Carlos pleading for mercy at the end of the race, like that's action packed, man.
I think one of the first races, I think the only race to date that I've watched with my dad. I was over at their house and it was on, and it was maybe it was last year Monza or the year before Monza, but it ended under safety car. So they did like 55 regular laps of pure racing, and then there was a safety car at the end, and they just drove across the line, and he said, "Is that it?" And I was like, "That's it." And he's like, "That's a bad way to end a race." And I was like, "That is a bad way to end a race. I agree."
That's unfortunate. That does happen sometimes.
And so
it's not preferred.
if you're a Drive to Survive fan or somebody that's just heard a lot about F1, right? Like let's say you're just like all your friends talked up F1, they're like, "Dude, Monza, it's crazy fast. There's a lot of action. It's going to be awesome. Watch this race." And then you watch that and you're like, "What's this? What's this mess?"
But that's the case. You could watch a football game in America where nobody scores.
Yeah, it's true.
You know what I mean? Until overtime. And yeah, granted, you have an overtime battle, or you'll have games that end in a draw.
Yeah, that's why I could never get into soccer or football for our European
hockey ends
friends.
in a draw.
Yeah, I can do hockey, but in soccer, I just never got why it'd be like 2-2, and they'd be like, "Okay, let's go home." I'm like, "What do you mean, let's go home? You're not done yet."
Right, but see, even if you're a soccer fan or football fan, you're not focused on who wins the game in that moment when games ended at 2-2. You're focused on the action that happened during that. Oh, this one dude had 5 different chances at the goal, and the goalie had these awesome saves.
Right.
You know, there's action in the race, and people have to be aware of that. You can't just look at the results. You can't just look at who's winning the championship. You got to dive a little deeper.
Okay. Anything else you want to look at for is F1 dying?
Guys, be patient. Change is coming. And until it does, look at the fine details. That's all I'm going to say.
Or look at the scandals. Go Twitter search or X
Yeah, if you
search
like
Christian
drama.
Horner.
If you like drama, there's definitely a lot of juicy scandals out there right
like
now.
if you're an F1 fan just for the drama, because that's what drive. I mean, honestly, okay, watching
right back in.
watching Drive to Survive, we could admit it. It's for the drama.
Yeah.
Like, you don't watch Drive to Survive for the race action because they maybe show 10 of the 20-something races and they show maybe 30 seconds of that race. You're watching it for the off-track stuff. That is going on all year, and you can follow it insanely up-to-date on X, on Instagram, on Reddit. Like, you can get all this stuff in real time, and then you can live the action through Drive to Survive. So like the conversations that Jeremiah and have, we'll be texting each other or in a group chat with our buddies, and it'll be like, "Whoa, did you see this tweet or did you see this Instagram post?" And you're like, "I can't wait to see how they talk about this on Drive to Survive."
Yes.
And so a year from now, when the new season Drive to Survive comes out, I'm gonna be like, "Whoa, they got Toto talking about this."
Yeah. Stuff that you didn't catch, stuff that they didn't, because they did the interviews with the guys, but it's hush hush until the new season comes out.
Yeah.
So you get a different perspective on something that you've actually been keeping up with. So it's kind of like you get all the drama right there, right then when it's happening, but then you get the little fine details afterwards, and you're like, "Whoa, I remember when they were talking about this. That's crazy. I didn't know that."
Or you see where Drive to Survive gets some things not necessarily wrong, but maybe they omit details for the casual fan. So with Hamilton's contract, this most previous season of Drive to Survive, they come on and say Lewis is re-up for 2 or 3 years at Mercedes, whatever it is. Partially true.
Right.
No one makes mention of the driver out clause that he has that said after 1 year he can go, which is what he's exercising after this season.
Yep.
They make no mention of it. It sounds like Lewis is going to be with Mercedes for forever, which if you're a casual fan, you're like, "Oh, yeah, he is." But no. And you could have been caught up on that real time, and you can see that stuff in Drive to Survive. So, I don't know. Keep watching Drive to Survive. Watch all that stuff. Try to watch the races if you can, and stick with the sport because there's, I mean, one, Max isn't going to be around forever. He'll call it quits at some point and go on to something else. But also, there's so many big things coming up in the sport. Lewis going to Ferrari, the 26 regulation changes. Like every year for the next 4 years in F1 has some big significant event that's going to happen that's just going to stir up commotion within the sport. Okay, let us know in the comments. Have you ever been to a Grand Prix race in person? I want to know.
Guys, keep watching, even if it's not Drive to Survive, but the actual races, because I'm telling you now, Zhou Guan Yu gets that Mercedes seat. It's going to happen. So stay tuned.
Not Carlos Sainz or Sergio Perez.
Zhou Guan Yu.
All right, guys, we'll see you.
Bye, guys.